So a college friend of mine, we were roommates back in college, we decided once to take a little road trip from Joplin, Missouri to Knoxville, Tennessee, because that's where Johnson University is. And we were going, there you go, Caleb. And we were going for a conference that they were having there. And so, we're taking this road trip, and everything's going fine until we hit about the Nashville area, and all of a sudden we just hit standstill traffic. I mean, bumper to bumper, we're just sitting there, and we've been driving for already about half the day at least at this point. So we're exhausted. We'll get to our hotel, get checked in, do all that. So we're just sitting in traffic. And after a few minutes, I look over, and I notice that to my left, a couple lanes over, there's this lane that's wide open. And every once in a while, a car just easily comes just flying through, no problem at all. And I'm trying to figure out, why are we all sitting here just stuck and no one's over in this lane? I don't get it. I don't know what's going on here. And, a couple minutes later, we get a little further down the road, and I can see this, sign on an overpass that says HOV lane. I'm like, HOV lane? I don't know what that is. I'm from Kansas. We don't have these things. I'm like, I don't know what HOV means. And, I look over at my roommate, and he grew up in Orlando, Florida, so he knows these things. And he's like, oh yeah, that's HOV. That's high occupancy vehicle lane. That's another fancy way of saying it's a carpool lane. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And just keep going. And I look over again, like, man, I wish we could be in that lane. Like, people are just cruising through over there. And I look back over at him, and he's just looking at me, waiting for the dots to connect. And I'm looking at him. I'm looking back at the lane. I'm looking forward. I'm looking back at him like, we can use that lane, can't we? Like, yes, we can. Because there's more than one of us in this car. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Again, I'm from Kansas. I don't know what these things are. So I turn on my turn signal and start to merge over a couple lanes, get into that carpool lane, and off we go, just cruising. It was cold, but we rolled down the windows and cranked the radio anyway. And as we go by, I'm just seeing all these angry, frustrated drivers just by themselves in their car, and their heads are down on the steering wheel because they're stuck in traffic and they're tired from work and they want to get home. And they're looking at us like, man, they're just having so much fun. I wish I had somebody else in the car so I could use the carpool lane. And that's just how I went, cruising down the road. And I know around here in Campbellsville, Kentucky, we really don't have a lot of carpool lanes. But if you've been around Nashville or some larger cities, you've maybe been able to experience on a road trip the joys of a carpool lane, where instead of being stuck in traffic, you can get on this one lane with other people in your car and you can go, right? And it's always, those things are just to incentivize getting more people to move than just more cars. It's to incentivize carpool, ride share, hey, instead of you just driving yourself to work, why don't you and a few coworkers go together, pick some people up, drop some people off? That's the whole encouragement of it. But there's been a whole lot of people that try to take advantage of the carpool lane without just asking somebody to ride along with them. So just last year, a guy got arrested for using a mannequin in the carpool lane, and they figured out he'd been doing this for over a year. Look, he even put a mask on him. Like this mannequin is COVID ready, right? And so when they figured out he'd been using it for over a year, they fined him $400, which I thought, that's it? I see why people still do this. So then there was a man in Arizona who got caught using a skeleton to get through. He's got him in camouflage. Remember, he was hoping the cops just wouldn't see him. He would just blend into the rest of the car, prop him up on a little ice chest there. So he used that to try to get through. And of course, I'm on the internet and I'm searching around for how people get around the carpool lane. And then all of a sudden I get these Google ads for this thing called Carpool Kenny. And Carpool Kenny is an inflatable that you can buy to put in the passenger seat so you can use the carpool lane. And I started looking into it more, and there's actually a whole bunch of characters. Like Carpool Kenny is just the original, but you can get the Grinch, you can get Santa Claus, you can get the Terminator. You can get anybody you want and get an inflatable, and boom, you're good. Use the carpool lane, right? You can trick people with this. So, we chuckle at that. We laugh at oh man, people are just, mannequins and inflatables and all this stuff, just use the carpool lane. But the truth is, we kind of do the same thing. People find fake, these fake passengers to help them use the carpool lane, but we do the same thing in our life with our relationships. Because, the carpool lane requires other people to be in the car with you. And the same is true for life. Life, and you've probably heard this a million times, you've seen it on decorations, and it's, life is better together. We go further together. And to use the carpool lane, you have to have other people with you. But in life, we kind of do the same thing. We kind of create, if you will, fake friendships to pretend like we're good, to pretend like everything's going really well. So we get just close enough to people to make it seem like we're friends, but we're really not. We do things that you would think friends would do, but you don't really know anything about that person, and that person really doesn't know all that much about you. Like, you've never really opened up to each other. It's like, well, sure, we go out to eat, or we do this, or we do that, but, we don't really know what's going on with each other. We don't know all the secret things that are going on, the challenges we're facing, and we just kind of have these very shallow, fake friendships. And, of course, we live in a culture where the bar for friendship has just been lowered an awful lot. Like, sometimes it's like, well, I followed you on social media, so we're friends now, right? Like, that's all it takes. Or it's just, all it takes is doing very simple things, and you think, well, yeah, we're friends. We hung out once. I bumped into them at Kroger. We're friends. I know their name. But it's so much deeper than that. Friendships require a lot more than just that. And the challenge for us is, well, how do we go deeper in friendships? How do we have meaningful friendships? How do we find those people? And then how do we even build those kinds of relationships that go deeper, so that we have those people that can go with us in life on this journey that we have, people who can stand with us when there are challenges, when there are hard times, and people that we can actually share the really hard things that we're going through. How do we even do that? And so Proverbs has a lot to say about relationships and friendships. So in the first chapter of the book of Proverbs, Solomon gives this warning to anybody who's reading this. So in chapter 1, starting with verse 10, he says this: "My son, if sinful men entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, 'Come along with us, let's lie in wait for innocent blood, let's ambush some harmless soul, let's swallow them alive, like the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Cast lots with us,'" that means it's like join with us. "We will all share the loot. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths. For their feet rush into evil, they are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net where every bird can see it. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush only themselves. Such are the paths of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the life of those who get it." So Solomon opens up, he gives this warning. He says, hey, here's a warning about who you associate with. And he says, don't be enticed by these people. That means don't be convinced to go along with their plan. Kind of that phrasing is, don't be gullible, like don't be naive. In other words, if you lack wisdom, the wrong people can make a bad idea sound like a really good idea. And what this proverb kind of says, and even what psychologists and sociologists have found, is peer pressure kind of works, right? Like people have tested this over and over. They've put people in these group situations, and no matter how wrong the situation is, no matter how silly it is, the person goes along with everybody else because you don't want to stick out. You don't want to be the only person who wasn't doing it, whatever it was. And, I'm not sure if this is like a common problem, like I don't know if just people were out convincing everybody, hey, what we should do for fun today? Nothing's going on. Let's go lie in wait out on the roads. Let's go hide behind some rocks and ambush people and rob them. I don't know if that was a real situation, or, because we read this and it sounds like, well, that sounds like a dumb idea. Why on earth would you do that? And I wonder if maybe Solomon is giving us this picture of an idea that's obviously bad, just to point out how, at the time, it can seem like a good idea. But you back up, you get some perspective, you get a little wisdom, and you realize, that was a dumb idea. Why did I listen to them? And so maybe Solomon's trying to convince us, kind of just even through this story of, hey, the wrong people can make a bad idea seem like a good idea. So be really careful who you are around. Back in, I think about 2014, 2016, something like that, a comedy movie came out called Masterminds, and it stars like Zach Galifianakis. He plays kind of the main character. and it tells the real story of the 1997 Loomis Fargo bank heist, which I don't think it is anymore, but at the time, it was the single largest cash heist on U.S. soil. Nearly just over $17 million was stolen at once. And the movie, of course, it's a comedy, so they kind of add to it a little bit. They spin it up a bit more, but some of the details are actually the same. So this guy named David Gant, he worked at Loomis Fargo back in 1997, and good employee, did his job, kind of liked it. And there was this other girl he worked with named Kelly Campbell. And at one point, Kelly left the company, and she gets to know this other group of guys who aren't really great characters. And they see on the news, because just shortly before they attempted this heist, another guy down in Florida also robbed a Loomis Fargo facility and made off with several $1 million. And they thought, well, if he could do it, why can't we do it? And like, well, Kelly, you worked at Loomis Fargo, right? What kind of security are we talking about? And she's like, well, she kind of explained it to them. She's like, I don't work there anymore. I can't get us in. But then she remembers her friend David. Like, well, maybe David would help us out. So she goes to David and somehow convinces him to help. So here's what David agrees to do, which I don't know why he agreed to do this. He agreed to be the one guy who would go into the Loomis Fargo facility after hours, take all the money out of the vault that he had a key to, put it all in the back of a van, drive the van out of the facility, and then he would flee the country to Mexico with $50,000. Because $50,000 in 1997 was the most amount of money you could legally take across the border. One more dollar and they have to report you. So I don't know why he agreed to let all these people he's never met before keep all the millions of dollars. And then they said, sure, David, while you're in Mexico, we'll just wire you money occasionally, in amounts so that it doesn't draw attention, and you'll be fine. You'll be down in Mexico. Eventually, you'll have your millions. It's all going to be good. I don't know why he agreed to that, but he did. And so he does the robbery. He goes in after work. He loads up this armored truck full of cash and drives away with it and gets away to Mexico with $50,000. Small problem. The next day, everybody comes to work, and David's the only employee who doesn't show up. That's weird. Second problem. The vault's wide open, all the money's gone, so is a van. Well, that's weird. Next problem. They go check the security footage, and they can clearly see David walking to and from the vault, loading the back of this truck with $17 million in cash. Next problem. David left his car parked at the Loomis Fargo facility with his driver's license, his wedding ring, bunch of personal identifiable information, so they knew he robbed the facility. This is easy. This is a no-brainer. So they pretty quickly arrested him down in Mexico. It wasn't hard. But here's what everybody else did. Everybody else agreed, hey, don't go spending money because, they're going to be watching real close. So, just lay low, don't deposit the money, just kind of wait a little while before you start spending it. Nobody did that. Like within the same month, I think it was Kelly Campbell who went to the bank teller and said, hey, what's the largest amount of money I can deposit before you need to report me? So she deposited that amount of money, and then the teller reported her. So she got arrested. Then it was pretty quick to find out the other people involved because they found that these other folks who had kind of planned the whole thing, all of a sudden moved a few states away, bought this multi-million-dollar house with cash, bought a brand new BMW in cash, also bought like one of those big wooden carved like Indians you see outside of old gas stations and stuff to promote cigars. They bought one of those for $800 and put it in the living room for some reason. So they pretty much tracked all these people down and arrested them. And it was a complete and total failure. And we look at that, and obviously they made a comedy out of it because it's hilarious they did all these dumb things and got caught. And we look at that and go, well, that's a bad idea. Why on earth did you do that? Because for some reason, at some point, it just sounded like a good idea. Like, hey, if we get away with it, we'll have millions of dollars. Which is also what Solomon does in this proverb. He says these people, they'll say, hey, if we do this, think of all the money we'll have. And that gets them. And so Solomon's warning is, hey, you get the wrong people, and they're going to try to convince you a bad idea sounds like a really good idea. And it's not. So he says you got to be careful with who you go with. And throughout Proverbs, there's a variety of warnings about what kinds of people, and there's all kinds of character warnings and everything else. But, a couple of the things that Solomon later warns is be careful about, like an angry person, because if their outlook on life is always really angry or always really bitter, like that's going to change how you view the world. I mean, just think about it. If you were to take a road trip, do you want to really take a multi-hour, multi-day road trip with somebody who's just like always angry or always bitter? Like that's just going to make the road trip really, really lame. You want somebody who's okay listening to the same psalm for 3 hours in a row, because that's what happens on road trips. And Solomon also, at other points, says, hey, go with wise people. If you go with those who are wise, you'll be wise. If you go with fools, you'll become a fool. Because the people you go along with in life, the people you're friends with, you want to have the same like destination in mind, similar values, similar beliefs, because they'll determine where you go, right? If they want to go the same place you do, just like the carpool lane, if you're all going to the same school, the same business, same part of town, that makes it really easy. Versus if one person's like, hey, I know we're halfway down the freeway, I'm just going to get out here. Is that cool? And they just like roll out. You're like, that's not okay at all. That person's crazy. So Proverbs talks about you got to find these people who are going to go with you for the long haul. So if I could sum up what Proverbs has to say about relationships in a sentence, it would be this. A real friend travels with you towards God. A real friend travels with you towards God. They don't try to distract you from God. They don't keep you from God. They help you on that journey towards Him. They have the same destination that you do. They have similar values, similar beliefs. They're going to help you get there. Now, as soon as I say that, here's kind of the thing that happens. If you don't follow Jesus, you read that and go, so what am I supposed to do? Like, is there any wisdom in this for me? Well, yeah, Proverbs can still help you out, but I just want you to know that having a Christian for a friend is probably the best deal you can get, because Christians should be your best friend, because Christians should be the people who love you unconditionally. They should be the people who always have grace and forgiveness for you. They should be the ones that can listen and understand and try to help as best they can. But you also got to know, like, here's the trade-off. If you're a friend with a Christian, we're gonna tell you about Jesus, of course. Like, there are gonna be times we're gonna give you advice, and it's gonna come from the Bible, because we really believe following Jesus is the best thing you can do. So yeah, that's gonna happen. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, this doesn't mean you can't have non-Christians as friends. It just means you're probably not going to be able to go as deep with them as you would if they also follow Jesus. It might mean you ask them for advice, but you might have to kind of be a little careful with it, because they may have a different destination in mind. They may have advice that you're like, well, that doesn't really click with what God has to say about what we do. So, okay, I'll take your advice, I'll think about it, but that doesn't quite line up with Scripture. So you have to know that's going to be the case. And there are times, where you may have a friend who's non-Christian, and you just have to politely excuse yourself from certain activities. You say, hey, that's great, you guys are going to do that. I'm not going to be a part of that. That's just not something that my identity in Christ doesn't allow for. I'm not going to do that. Or say, hey, I'll come, but I'm not going to fully participate. So sometimes that happens. But there's still very important and helpful things that Proverbs and the Bible has to say about friendships. Because whether you believe in Jesus or you don't, we all need deep friendships. We all do. And I think the Bible has some great advice for how we build those kinds of relationships that God designed us for. So here's just a few things I want to unpack in Proverbs that we can do to help us not just look for good friendships, people to do this, but these are things we should do ourselves in our own relationships. So the first thing is speak the whole truth. Proverb 27:6 says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. In other words, real friends tell you the truth even when it hurts. If you've got somebody who they always have something nice to say, even when you do something really bad, and they always are like, all they have for you is good things, and they can never tell you the honest truth, that's a red flag, right? A real friend is somebody who they don't always sugarcoat it. Because we all need the person who after lunch is going to say, hey, you've got some lettuce stuck in your tooth, you should probably get that. Or, hey, you were kind of a jerk today. What was that about? Or, why'd you say that? Or, yeah, you're kind of being prideful. Like, what's going on? Like, we all need those people that are going to tell us the truth. There's this phrase that I've heard that's, say the last 10% of truth. And the reason for that is because when we're trying to be honest with somebody, usually there's that last little part at the end, that last little 10% you don't want to say because you're afraid that's going to hurt the person. So I'll be mostly honest because it'll be helpful, but that last little part that you actually need to hear, I'm just going to keep that to myself. And to build the friendships that Jesus intends for us to have, you're gonna have to give the whole truth. Like you're gonna have to be okay to give that last 10% because you care about that person and they really need to hear it, right? I've seen some people they've gotten in a lot of trouble because no one ever told them that last 10%. Like no one ever told them, hey, you're really actually bad at that job. Like, how many people went on to American Idol because no one had the guts to tell them, you don't sound good. Like, just tell them, you don't sound good. Please don't go on that TV show, right? So say the last 10% of truth. Here's the second thing. Let things go. Proverbs 10:12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. Real friends, they know when to let things go, and they know when the best thing is to say nothing at all. Now, I know there's time where there's conflict, and you need to talk about it, you need to figure it out, you need to address it, usually because it's ongoing, but there's a lot of times there's just this, somebody just said something out of character, they said something, just kind of a one-time thing, and it upset you or hurt your feelings, just let it go. Like, because in 10 minutes, in 12 hours, whatever it is, I'll be fine, and it's not really that big of a deal. And remember, love keeps no record of wrongs, so it's not like you're storing that comment away for later. It's like, love just says, hey, I'm going to let it go. It's okay. I'm sure you didn't mean it. I'm sure, you've just had a bad day. You just see grace for the other person, and you let it go. You let it go. A third thing we can do is keep close and open up. Proverbs 27:10, do not forsake your friend and the friend of your father, and do not go to your brother's house when disaster strikes you. Better a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. Because real friends, they stay close. And when you need help, they open up. Not just by telling you what you need to hear or telling you what's going on in their life, but opening up what they have to help you out. Now, this proverb is not so much like saying, hey, your family, even if they live far away, they're bad. That's not what this proverb is about. This proverb is trying to emphasize the value of having friends in close proximity, whether that's distance or emotional proximity. People that you have a high amount of trust with, people that you can share things with, and sometimes, it really just means it's really good to have somebody just physically close by. Let me tell you one of the ways this is played out for Jenna and I. So as you know, within the last month or so, our community has had 2 tornadoes, which is a bit unusual. And so when the first tornado came through that caused a whole lot of destruction in our community, I saw the weather was getting bad, and so I texted John Andrews, because John and Emily live down the street from us, and they have a basement in their house. We don't. And so I texted him kind of before bed and said, hey man, if it gets really bad and we need to go somewhere, can we come over to your house? He's like, absolutely. I'm just going to leave the door unlocked. If something happens, just come right on over, head down to the basement. I'm like, all right, great. So of course, 3 a.m. that night, our phones are blaring because of a tornado warning. And so we jump in the car, we grab our dog, and we run down the street, go right inside, down to their basement, and had a little party for 2 hours, just kind of hung out in the middle of the night. And that's what we need friends for. We need those people who are like, hey, if something's going on, I just need your help. And they say, absolutely, what can we do? How can we help each other out? And so sometimes we need those kinds of people. Now, there are going to be times where you're going to have a friendship and we're going to be separated by distance. And that's still okay, because when Proverbs was written, it was in a world where if you live several hours away, you're probably just never going to see each other. Like there's not cell phones, there's not social media, there's not FaceTime, like there's none of that. So Proverbs is looking at a world where if you are not in close physical proximity, like that's kind of the end of your relationship. But we do live in a world now where you can have people who they don't live close to you and they can still be these kinds of friends for you. It just probably means that you find times where you call each other, you catch up, right? You do what you can. Or when there is a problem or a reason to celebrate, you drop everything, say, hey, we're on our way. We're going to get a plane ticket, we're going to get in the car, we're going to come help you out. Or these are those friends who you haven't seen each other for years. But you can sit down and just catch up like it was yesterday. And it's not just you're just talking about how's the weather and hey, did you see the game last night? This is, hey, how how are you doing with your son? I know there was some tension there. How's that going? Or I'd say, I know work's been really stressful. I know you're not feeling very good about how you doing. It's things like that. And so this proverb is, hey, when you find those people, you stay close and you stay open to what's going on. And here's just one of the last things that we can do that I want to talk about this morning, and that's invite people in. Proverbs 17:19 says, "He who loves a quarrel loves sin. He who builds a high gate invites destruction," which is a little bit of the opposite of what we would think. We would think, well, if you build a big gate, you're protecting yourself. Actually, no. Because in our world, we've learned how to build really big gates or really big fences. And it's really easy to tell that. You just got to look at our homes. Because you can actually tell a lot about a country's culture by just looking at the way they build and design homes. So in America, the way we all designed houses changed right after World War II. Before World War II, the common design of a house was to build a big front porch and to have more space in your front yard, not your backyard. And after work, after dinner in the evening, you and your family, you'd go out on that front porch where you'd have room for rocking chairs and a porch swing, and you'd, have, glass of Coke or sweet tea or lemonade or whatever, and you could sit and talk, and the kids would go play in the yard, and everybody else was out in the yard, so all the kids just start playing together or riding bikes or whatever. And you can easily, if you want, if you're feeling a little more introverted, you can stay on your porch and just enjoy the weather or see what's going on. Or you can easily invite your neighbors over, they can invite you over, you can talk, you can see what's going on. Like that's how homes were designed. After World War II, we became a little more isolated and valued independence. So people started building homes differently. We traded front porches for back decks. We shortened up the front yard to make bigger backyards. And we invented privacy fences so you could keep everybody else out of your business. And so instead of sitting in the front yard and just being part of your neighborhood and seeing what's going on, now if someone's going to get into your life, you have to invite them. Like you have to be intentional. If your neighbor just happens to walk by just to make sure they know they're not welcome, here's this huge old fence around my backyard, you can't come in. You can't do that. You got to get permission. And so we have this completely different culture. And Proverbs says that's actually not maybe the wisest thing to do. Because when you build those fences, when you build those kinds of division, when you need help, there's no one there to help you. Either because no one actually knows you need help, because you didn't tell anybody, you haven't been honest with anybody about what's going on, so no one even knows that they should be helping, or they should be praying, or they should come over, or just because there's no relationship there. So they don't even know what to do. And so Proverbs says, yeah, don't do that. Don't build bigger fences and gates, right? I think kind of the adage you've probably heard is something like, don't build bigger fences, build longer tables or something like that. It's just like, hey, invite people to be a part of your life. Let people in. And that's just a very different kind of way that Proverbs says for us to live our lives. And so one of the ways that we can live this out is through small groups. And of course, today we plan to launch small groups tonight, but because of kind of the COVID numbers kicking up, we're just going to kind of give that a couple weeks out of some safety and just being cautious. But if you haven't signed up for a small group yet, I want to really encourage you to do that, because that's a great way to build these kinds of relationships. Because at some point, here's what happens in a small group that makes it go from being a good small group to a great small group. Self-disclosure. And in fact, psychologists have figured out what is it that makes a friendship a friendship. Like, when do you go from just being like acquaintances and buddies to real friends? And some of the things they learned are not rocket science. It's things like, well, you see each other often enough, right? Obviously, like you go to school together, you work together, you live next door, you're at church. There's some interaction. But they really want to figure out, okay, what really makes it stick? Is it what you have in common? What is it? And they found out that when a person has self-disclosure with somebody else and it's reciprocal, that's the moment you go from being like buddies and acquaintances to friends. It's that moment when you've built enough of the foundation to your relationship that you can open up and you can say, hey, here's something kind of personal that's been going on I'm really struggling with. I need to share it with somebody. and you tell them. And then the other person reacts appropriately, whether that means they just sit in silence with you, or they pray for you, or they share some words with you to try to help, and then they share with you. They open up too. And there's always this moment with a small group where, sometimes at the beginning, it's a bunch of people that don't really know each other all that well, and they start to talk and get to know each other, and they see each other every week, and they build this foundation to the relationship, and then at some point, somebody in that group finally feels safe enough to take the risk and share something. And then when they do that, it's just like you break the ice. And if you're at a good spot, everybody else in that group, they start to open up, and they start to help out, and they leave group going, wow, our group feels different. Like, we feel closer because you shared. And then the next, somebody else feels like sharing, and somebody else starts to share. And when that happens, you become a group that sticks together for a long time and stays connected. And so if you haven't signed up for small groups yet, you've got another week to do that. And so, again, like Rodney said, you can use literally you can use just about every method in the church that you've got, right? Whether it's just talking to a staff member, using our app to sign up, going to cvillechristian.org, using the tear off in the bulletin, whatever it is, you can do that. But there's another step you can take too. And that is, we also have Sunday morning Bible studies that you can join. That's another place to find people to build those kinds of relationships with. And for some of you, being in one of those two groups is a great place. But at some point, here's the rest of the challenge. You can't just attend those and participate. You've got to go all in. Like, at some point, you've got to actually open up and share. Or at some point, if you're in a Bible study that maybe is a little too big for your comfort level, it's you grab a few other guys, you grab a few other girls, and you say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. So the challenge is get in some kind of a group where you can have those people. And then build that relationship and open up. Because we're all better when we are together. And that's God's intention for all of us. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much for what you did through your Son, Jesus. And I thank you that you give us wisdom and advice as well. That you give us just ways that we can think about how we can live in this world, how we can process this world. And God, I'm thankful that you give us other people. You even said in the very beginning of the Bible that it's not good for us to be alone, that we need each other. And so, Father, I just pray that you would give us those people. And when we're afraid, or maybe when we're nervous to open up, I just ask that you would give us the courage to do that. Because we're better when we're together, and we need other people in our lives to help us when things are good and when things are really bad. We need others to support us, to pray for us. And so, Holy Spirit, I just pray that you would help unite us.